Commander Elena Santos stood at the observation deck of the Lunar Defense Station, her dark eyes fixed on the blue marble of Earth hanging in the void. 20 years of space service hadn't dampened her wonder at that view, but today something else occupied her thoughts. The quantum communications array had detected an anomaly, unlike anything they'd seen before. "Commander, the signal's stabilizing," Lieutenant Wei called from his station. It's not random noise. There's a pattern." The quantum array had been humanity's latest breakthrough, theoretically capable of instantaneous communication across vast distances. But in the 5 years since its activation, they'd never received anything but test signals from Earth's colonies on Mars and Europa. Until now. The message came through in pulses of light, each burst carrying complex data patterns that their AI systems struggled to decode. When the translation finally appeared on their screens, Elena felt her breath catch. "To the warriors of the heavy world, we have watched your development. Your strength is needed. The Nebula Reavers consume all in their path. 57 civilizations have already fallen. We are the Celesti Alliance, and we offer you a choice. Stand with us as equals, or watch as the galaxy burns." Within hours, Elena found herself in the United Earth Defense Council chamber beneath Geneva. The holographic displays showed the translated message alongside streams of data about the Celesti Alliance, a confederation of species that had apparently been monitoring Earth for decades. Admiral Chen paced before the assembled military leaders. "The Celesti have finally provided proof of what we've long suspected. We're not just different from other spacefaring species, we're exponentially more resilient. What they call a death world, we call home." The Admiral gestured, and new holographic images appeared, anatomical comparisons between humans and various alien species. The average Celesti evolved on a world with 1/3 Earth's gravity. Their bones would shatter under what we consider normal conditions. The strongest among them would struggle to lift what our children can carry. "And these Nebula Reavers?" General Martinez asked, his weathered face illuminated by the holograms. "What do we know about them?" "They're systematic destroyers," Elena answered, having spent hours studying the Celesti data. "They appear at the edges of civilized space, strip worlds of resources, and leave nothing alive. Conventional weapons barely slow them down. The Celesti believe our high-gravity evolution might be the key to fighting them effectively." The council chamber erupted in debate. Some argued for isolation. Earth had enough problems without involving itself in an interstellar war. Others saw an opportunity to establish humanity's place among the stars. But it was Dr. Sarah Chen, the Admiral's sister and lead cynobiologist, who silenced the room with a simple observation. "We've spent our entire existence wondering if we were alone in the universe," she said, her quiet voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "Now we know we're not. And our first act upon learning this is to debate whether we should help prevent genocide." Elena watched the mood of the room shift. It was true. Humanity had dreamed of the stars for millennia. But they'd never imagined their first major contact would come in the form of a desperate plea for help. The decision, when it came, was nearly unanimous. Earth would join the fight. Within days, the quantum array transmitted humanity's response to the Celesti Alliance. Elena, chosen as humanity's first representative, crafted the message herself. "We accept your offer of alliance. Humanity has never turned away from a fight when innocent lives were at stake. But understand this, we're not just coming as soldiers, we're coming as protectors. Earth stands ready." The response was immediate. The Celesti transmitted coordinates for a rendezvous point, along with technical specifications that made Earth's top scientists gasp in amazement. FTL drive schematics, shield technologies, weapon systems far beyond human development. Everything they'd need to join the fight. As Elena supervised the integration of alien tech with Earth's most advanced warship, she couldn't help but smile at the irony. Humanity had spent centuries seeing their high-gravity evolution as normal, never realizing it had turned them into something extraordinary by galactic standards. The renamed ship, Terra's Shield, would carry humanity's first combat force into the stars. Its crew, trained in 3 times normal gravity, would demonstrate why Earth's children had become the galaxy's best hope for survival. Status report. Elena called out as they prepared for their first FTL jump. All systems nominal. Commander. Y responded from his station. Celesti drive modifications are holding steady. We're ready. Elena took one last look at the Earth through the view screen. They were about to make history, not as conquerors or explorers, but as defenders of those who couldn't defend themselves. Take us out, Lieutenant. Let's show the galaxy what Deathworlders can do when we're fighting for something bigger than ourselves. The stars stretched into lines of light as the Terra's Shield made its first jump, carrying humanity's warriors to meet their new allies. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, the Nebula Reavers continued their advance, unaware that they were about to face something they'd never encountered before, a species that had evolved on a world that made them stronger than anyone could have imagined. The war for the galaxy was about to begin, and humanity was ready to show why sometimes the most dangerous species could become the greatest protectors. The Terra's Shield emerged from its FTL jump into a sea of stars that no human had ever seen before. The Celesti coordination point hung in space before them, a massive structure that resembled a blooming flower, its crystalline petals stretching for kilometers into space. Commander Elena Santos felt her crew's tension. This was the moment humanity had prepared for over the last 3 months, their first face-to-face contact with their new allies. More importantly, it was their first chance to prove they weren't the monsters their physical capabilities might suggest. Multiple ships approaching, Lieutenant Way reported, his fingers dancing across his console. Celesti design, but different configurations than what was in their technical package. Elena straightened in her command chair. Open communications on their specified frequencies. Let's not keep our hosts waiting. The holographic display shimmered to life, revealing a being that made several bridge crew members catch their breath. The Celesti ambassador resembled a living aurora, her translucent form shifting with patterns of light that seemed to dance beneath her skin. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that human vocal cords could never produce. "Welcome, children of the heavy world," the ambassador said through their translators. "I am Luminara, first speaker of the Alliance. We confess to some trepidation about this meeting." "Understandable," Elena replied, keeping her movements slow and deliberate as they'd practiced. "We know our physical capabilities might seem alarming, but we're here to help, nothing more." "Yes." Luminara's colors shifted to what their briefing suggested was thoughtful consideration. "Perhaps you should see why we called you. Please, dock with our station. There are those you should meet." The docking procedure proved more challenging than expected. The Celesti station's artificial gravity was set to their standard, 1/3 of Earth normal. Even with their suits compensating, Elena's crew had to move with exaggerated care to avoid damaging the delicate structure. Inside the station, they found a refugee camp. Thousands of beings from dozens of species huddled in makeshift shelters, their few possessions scattered around them. Many bore signs of injury or exhaustion. All showed fear when the humans first entered. "These are survivors from the Reavers' latest attack," Luminara explained as they toured the facility. The Helix cluster, 7 inhabited systems, all struck within days of each other. Our fastest ships could only save a fraction of the population. Elena watched as her medical team, led by Dr. Sarah Chen, began setting up their equipment. The refugees' initial terror at the human size and strength turned to amazement as they witnessed the gentle precision with which the Earth doctors worked. "Your injuries," Sarah said to a group of wounded refugees, her voice soft despite her translator. "They're consistent with high-G trauma. The Reavers use gravity weapons. Their ships generate gravitic pulses," Luminara confirmed. "Most species vessels are crippled by the first hit. Crews suffer massive internal injuries, even with inertial dampeners. We had assumed your own gravity technology must be superior to resist such attacks." "No," Elena said, understanding dawning. We don't resist it. We endure it. Our bodies evolved to handle far greater stresses than their weapons can generate. The implications hit her like a physical force. The Reavers' primary weapon, the thing that had made them nearly invincible against other species, would be far less effective against humans and their reinforced ships. Back aboard the Terra's shield, Alina met with her senior staff. The ship's mess hall had been modified to accommodate their alien guests, with specialized low-G sections where Luminara and her advisors could sit comfortably. The Reavers will strike again, Luminara said, her colors now showing what they'd learned to recognize as urgency. Our predictive models show 3 possible targets, all heavily populated systems. Then we prepare a welcome for them, Captain Miguel Ramirez, Alina's tactical officer, said. He pulled up a holographic display of their modified weapon systems. We've integrated your energy weapon designs with our own mass drivers. But we've also been working on something new. The display showed their prototype, a boarding craft designed to match the Reaver ship's gravitic pulses, allowing human strike teams to enter enemy vessels. The Celesti advisor's colors paled at the idea of physically engaging the Reavers. Your people would willingly enter their ships? One advisor asked, their translator struggling to convey their mix of horror and awe. The gravitational forces alone would be less than what we experience in our combat training. Alina finished. We're not just bringing our technology to this fight. We're bringing our entire evolutionary history, every adaptation that helped us survive on a world that would crush most species. The meeting continued late into the station's night cycle as humans and aliens worked to combine their strengths. The Celesti's advanced technology would be merged with humanity's physical resilience and combat expertise. Supply lines were established, communication protocols standardized, and battle plans drawn up. As Alina walked through the refugee section one last time before returning to her ship, a small alien child, species unknown to her, approached. The child held up what appeared to be a drawing, showing stick figures of different sizes standing together against a dark, threatening shape. The strong ones came to help, the child said through a borrowed translator. Like in the old stories. Alina knelt down, carefully keeping her movements gentle. Yes, she said. We came to help. And we're not leaving until you're all safe. Later, as the Terra's shield prepared to depart for its first patrol, Alina looked at the drawing now mounted near her command chair. Humanity had stepped onto the galactic stage, not as conquerors or traitors, but as protectors. It wasn't the role anyone had expected, but perhaps it was the one they were born to play. All stations report ready, Wei announced. Then let's get to work, Alina commanded. We have a galaxy to defend. The Terra's shield accelerated away from the Celesti station, ready to show the Reavers why attacking planets under humanity's protection would prove to be their greatest mistake. The war was about to enter a new phase, and the hunters were about to learn what it meant to face prey that could fight back. The Proxima system blazed on the Terra's shield's tactical display, its 7 stars dancing in their complex orbital pattern. Intelligence suggested the Reavers would strike here next, a system home to over 4 billion sentients spread across 12 habitable worlds. Contact. Wei's voice cut through the bridge's tension. Multiple signatures emerging from FTL. Energy patterns match Reaver profiles. Alina leaned forward in her command chair, watching as the enemy ships materialized against the backdrop of stars. They were exactly as the refugee reports had described. Massive vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, their surfaces rippling like oil on water. 37 ships, Captain Ramirez reported from Tactical. Largest concentration we've seen yet. They're deploying in their standard attack formation. All hands to battle stations, Alina commanded. Signal the fleet. Operation Hammer Drop is go. The Terra's shield wasn't alone. Hidden behind the system's largest gas giant were 5 more Earth vessels, each crewed by humans who had trained all their lives in gravity that would kill most species. Along with them waited a dozen Celesti ships, their advanced energy weapons modified to work in concert with human tactics. The Reavers moved with mechanical precision, their fleet spreading out in a pattern that had spelled doom for countless civilizations, their gravitic weapons powered up, ready to crush any resistance. They never got the chance to fire. The Earth fleet erupted from behind the gas giant, their engines pushing them to accelerations that would have turned any other species to paste, even with inertial dampeners. The Reavers' formation shifted to meet this new threat, but they were too slow. First wave, now. Elena ordered. Mass drivers from 6 human ships opened up simultaneously, hurling projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. The Reavers' shields flared against impacts that would have vaporized most vessels. 3 enemy ships died in the first volley, their dark hulls splitting open to reveal something that made the sensor operators gasp. "Commander," Dr. Chen's voice came through the comm, tight with excitement. "The debris. It's biological. The ships aren't just vessels. They're organisms." Elena processed this as she watched the battle unfold. The Reavers had begun to react, their ships turning to bring weapons to bear. A gravitic pulse washed over the Terra's shield, but the reinforced hull and her Earth-evolved crew barely noticed what would have crippled other species ships. "Celesti Fleet, execute Pattern Sigma," she commanded. "Show them what those new weapons can do." The alien vessels emerged from their own hiding spots among the system's asteroids, their modified energy weapons lashing out with precise coordination. Where once they had fought desperately just to survive, now they struck with confidence, knowing their human allies could take the brunt of any counterattack. The battle split into chaos as ships maneuvered at speeds that defied conventional tactics. Human vessels pushed their crews to the limit, performing maneuvers that looked like suicide to their alien allies, but were well within the safety margins for Deathworlders. Reaver flagship identified. Ramirez called out. It's the source of their coordination signals. Permission to launch boarders. Elena studied the tactical display. The discovery that the Reaver ships were living organisms changed everything. If they could capture one intact. "Launch the boarding pods," she ordered. "All ships, concentrate fire on these coordinates. Give our teams the cover they need." 5 boarding pods shot out from the Terra's shield's launch tubes, each carrying a team of Earth's finest warriors. The pods themselves were a fusion of human and Celesti technology, designed to match the Reavers' gravitic frequencies and literally phase through their organic hulls. "First pod has breached," Wei reported, monitoring the tactical feed. "Second and third, successful penetration. 4 and 5 are on target." Elena watched as the dots representing her boarding teams entered the Reaver flagship. These men and women had trained in 4 times Earth gravity for this mission. Whatever they found inside that ship, they were ready for it. "Commander," Dr. Chen broke in again. "I've analyzed the debris patterns. These aren't just living ships. They're a collective organism. Each ship is like a cell in a larger body, sharing a distributed consciousness. That's why they're so coordinated." The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. They weren't fighting a fleet. They were fighting a single entity, one that thought and moved as a unified whole. But that also meant the flagship isn't just coordinating them, she realized. It's thinking for them. "Lieutenant Wei, patch me through to the boarding teams." "Channel open. All teams, be advised." Elena's voice was sharp with urgency. "You're not just aboard a ship. You're inside a brain. Find their central nervous system. Either we capture it intact, or we sever their connection to the fleet." The battle raged on as the boarding teams fought their way through living corridors that pulsed with alien life. The Reaver fleet's coordination began to show signs of strain as more ships were destroyed, their collective consciousness fragmenting under the assault. Teams report they'd reached something like a central chamber, Wei announced. "It's Mayim. You need to see this." The video feed showed a vast chamber filled with what looked like floating brains connected by webs of neural tissue. As they watched, the structures pulsed with patterns of light that matched the fleet's communication frequencies. "Dr. Chen," Elena called. "Are you seeing this?" "Yes." Sarah's voice was filled with wonder. It's a biological quantum computer. The Reavers aren't just ships. They're an attempted merger of organic and artificial intelligence. Something gone horribly wrong. A gravitic pulse slammed into the Terra's shield, stronger than any they'd encountered. Belina gripped her chair as alarms blared. Hull stress at 87% of maximum, engineering reported. They're learning, adapting their weapons to our tolerance levels. Belina knew they had seconds to decide. The boarding teams could try to capture the neural center intact, giving them priceless intelligence about their enemy. Or they could destroy it, likely crippling the entire Reaver fleet, but losing the chance to truly understand what they were fighting. The decision was made for them. The Reaver ships suddenly began moving with renewed coordination, their tactics shifting in ways that suggested they'd analyzed human capabilities and were adapting. All teams, destroy the neural center, Alina ordered. Full retreat as soon as it's done. The video feed showed her boarding teams placing their charges. The chamber erupted in light, and across the battlefield, the Reaver fleet seemed to spasm. Ships collided with each other, their perfect coordination shattered. All vessels, open fire, Alina commanded. Don't let any of them escape to warn the others. The combined human and Celesti fleet struck with overwhelming force. When the last Reaver ship finally died, the debris field stretched for thousands of kilometers. But they had learned something vital. Their enemy wasn't just a mindless swarm. They were facing something far more complex, an engineered life form that had perhaps once been meant for peaceful purposes, but had evolved into something terrible. As recovery teams began collecting debris for study, Alina received a transmission from the Celesti flagship. Luminara's image showed colors they'd never seen before. Your people, the alien leader said, are even more remarkable than we had hoped. You've given us something we'd almost lost. A real chance at victory. Alina looked at the tactical display, at the dots representing the 12 inhabited worlds they'd saved today. We're just getting started, she replied. Now we know what we're fighting. We can find its weaknesses. The Reavers aren't invincible. They're just another form of life. And on Earth, we learned long ago that all life has its limits. The battle was over, but the war had entered a new phase. Humanity had proven they could fight the Reavers effectively. Now they just had to find a way to end the threat permanently, before more worlds fell to the collective consciousness that saw all other life as resources to be consumed. The laboratories aboard the Celesti station hummed with activity as Dr. Sarah Chen studied the samples from the Reaver debris through a quantum microscope. 3 months had passed since the Battle of 7 Stars, and while that victory had given the Alliance hope, the Reavers had adapted their tactics. The war had reached a stalemate. Look at this, Sarah called to her Celesti colleague. Dr. Zurin, the neural tissue shows signs of rapid mutation. They're not just learning from their defeats, they're evolving. The ethereal alien scientist floated closer, its bioluminescent patterns shifting with interest. The rate of adaptation is unprecedented. Each encounter with your ships has forced them to develop new defenses. Sarah manipulated the controls, zooming in on a cluster of cells. Something about their structure nagged at her memory. These look almost like... Wait. She pulled up data from Earth's biological archives. These are similar to extremophile bacteria from Earth's deep-sea vents. The Reavers are incorporating genetic patterns from every world they consume. On the command deck above, Alina studied tactical reports with Captain Ramirez and Luminara. The holoprojector showed the movement of Reaver fleets across the galaxy, their attacks becoming more strategic, more focused. They're avoiding direct confrontation with human ships now, Ramirez noted. Striking softer targets, but with smaller forces that can retreat before we arrive. They're learning, Alina said, not just tactically, but strategically. That biological quantum computer we discovered, it's processing combat data, evolving their entire species in response to our resistance. Luminara's colors darkened with concern. Our long-range sensors detect 3 new Reaver fleet concentrations forming in the outer rim. Their ships appear to be larger than previous encounters. "Commander," Sarah's voice cut through their discussion. "I need you in the lab immediately. We found something." When Alina arrived, Sarah and Dr. Zirin had filled the lab's holographic display with cellular imagery. "The Reavers aren't just copying genetic patterns," Sarah explained. "They're trying to adapt themselves to match our capabilities. But look what happens when their cells encounter common Earth bacteria." The display showed Reaver cells rapidly breaking down when exposed to what appeared to be ordinary microorganisms. "These are basic soil bacteria?" Alina asked, leaning closer. "Yes," Sarah's excitement was palpable. "The Reavers can adapt to match our physical capabilities, but they have no defense against our microbial ecosystem. They've never encountered anything like Earth's bacterial diversity. Because they've never consumed a death world before," Luminara realized, her colors brightening with understanding. "Your planet's aggressive microbiome is as alien to them as your physical strength." Alina's mind raced with the implications. "Can we weaponize this?" "Better," Sarah replied. "We can use it as a shield. A bacterial barrier that makes boarding our ships suicide for their hybrid organic technology. And potentially," she manipulated the display, showing the delivery system, "a way to neutralize their neural networks without destroying them." The next few weeks saw frantic activity as the Alliance prepared their new strategy. Earth ships were retrofitted with bacterial cultivation chambers, their hulls seeded with modified versions of common soil organisms. Celesti scientists worked alongside human biochemists to develop delivery systems that could penetrate Reaver bioarmor. They got their chance to test it sooner than expected. A Reaver fleet attacked the Centauri colony, larger than any they'd encountered before. The new Reaver ships were massive organic constructs that seemed specifically engineered to counter human tactical advantages. The Terra's shield led the response fleet, now emblazoned with the new symbol of the Alliance, a human hand clasped with a Celesti light form, representing the union of strength and technology. Multiple contacts, Way reported as they dropped out of FTL. 50-plus Reaver vessels, including 3 of the new capital ships. "They're not running this time," Ramirez observed. "They think they've evolved enough to face us directly." Alina allowed herself a grim smile. "Let's show them why evolution isn't just about physical strength. All ships, execute Operation Gaia's Touch." The battle began conventionally enough, with human ships demonstrating the maneuverability that had won them their previous victories. But when the Reavers moved to board, expecting to find weakened prey, they encountered something their collective consciousness couldn't process. "Reaver boarding parties are deteriorating," Way reported, watching through internal sensors. "Their bioarmor is literally dissolving on contact with our hull bacteria." The massive capital ships tried to compensate, launching waves of smaller attack craft. But each vessel that touched a human ship became contaminated, carrying the bacterial agents back to their parent vessels. "Their neural networks are shutting down," Sarah reported from her lab. "The bacterial agents are disrupting their quantum cellular communication. We're not just defeating them, we're severing their collective consciousness." Alina watched as the mighty Reaver fleet began to break apart, their ships losing coordination as Earth's microscopic defenders did what billions of years of evolution had prepared them to do: protect their home environment from hostile organisms. "All ships, press the advantage," she ordered. "Don't let them adapt to this. Show them what happens when you challenge not just humanity's strength, but the entire ecosystem that forged us." The battle became a rout. Without their neural networks, the Reaver ships lost the coordination that made them deadly. Some tried to flee, but they carried the bacterial contamination with them, a gift that would spread through their entire species. In the aftermath, as recovery teams began the process of capturing intact Reaver vessels for study, Alina received a message from Earth. The Security Council had reviewed the battle data and reached a decision. Humanity would not just fight alongside the Celesti. They would take the lead in defending the galaxy. "Your people continue to amaze us," Luminara said, her colors showing what they'd learned to recognize as deep respect. We sought your help for your physical strength, never imagining that your true power lay in the invisible allies you brought with you. Elena looked at the tactical display, where the dots representing surviving Reaver ships were retreating to the galactic rim. We learned long ago on Earth that no species survives alone. Every living thing, from the largest predator to the smallest microbe, plays its part in the greater ecosystem. The Reavers tried to set themselves above that natural law. Their mistake was thinking that evolution only counts when you can see it. The war wasn't over, but its turning point had arrived. Humanity had brought more than just their strength to the galaxy. They'd brought the full power of a world that had spent billions of years preparing its children for the stars. The Reavers were about to learn why challenging the Deathworld's entire ecosystem was their greatest mistake. The stars of the galactic core blazed through the Terra's shield's observation deck as Elena stood with Sarah and Luminara, studying the tactical display. 6 months had passed since they'd discovered the bacterial defense against the Reavers, and the war had entered its final phase. The surviving Reaver fleets have consolidated here. Elena indicated a region near the galaxy's edge. Long-range scans suggest they're attempting to merge into a single superorganism. A desperate gambit. Luminara's colors shifted with concern. They seek to evolve beyond our bacterial countermeasures by combining their collected genetic material. Sarah manipulated the display, showing the latest sensor data. The process is creating something we've never seen before. The combined mass of their merged ships is approaching that of a small moon. The Alliance fleet had gathered for this final confrontation. 30 Earth vessels, now integrated with Celesti technology, accompanied by ships from a dozen other species who had overcome their fear of Deathworlders to join the fight. The combined fleet represented the largest military force ever assembled in the galaxy's history. Latest intelligence from our probes, Captain Ramirez reported as he joined them. The Reaver fusion is nearly complete. They're not just combining their ships, they're merging their collective consciousness into something new. Elena studied the reports. The Reavers had shown remarkable adaptation throughout the war, but this was different. They weren't just evolving their bodies, they were transforming their very nature. Dr. Chen, she turned to Sarah, will our bacterial defenses still work against this new form? Uncertain, Sarah admitted. They're incorporating genetic material from every species they've ever encountered, including samples from our previous battles. They're trying to turn our own strategy against us. A signal from the command center interrupted their discussion. Commander, Wei's voice was tight with urgency. The Reaver mass is moving. It's speaking. The transmission filled their communications channels, a voice that seemed to combine millions of conscious minds into one overwhelming intelligence. Children of the heavy world, it resonated in frequencies that made the ship's hull vibrate. You have taught us much about evolution. Now witness our transcendence. The massive Reaver organism began to move, its surface rippling with energy patterns that defied their sensors. As they watched, it started to fragment, not into ships, but into something else entirely. They're creating some kind of energy beings, Sarah reported, her instruments struggling to analyze the transformation. They're attempting to evolve beyond physical form entirely. All ships, battle stations, Elena commanded. But even as she gave the order, she realized conventional weapons might be useless against what the Reavers were becoming. The energy beings spread out across space, their forms reminiscent of the Celesti but twisted into something predatory. They began to approach the Alliance fleet, passing through shields as if they didn't exist. Hull integrity failing on multiple ships, Wei reported. They're trying to merge with our systems directly. Elena felt it then, a pressure in her mind as the evolved Reavers attempted to connect with the organic matter of her brain. Around her, she saw both humans and aliens struggling against the psychic assault. But then something unexpected happened. The bacterial colonies they'd seeded throughout their ships began to react, not just physically, but on a quantum level. Commander, Sarah's voice cut through the mental static. The bacteria, they're not just attacking the Reavers' biology. They're generating some kind of quantum interference field. Our evolution didn't just give us physical defenses. It created an entire ecosystem of quantum-resistant life. Elena fought through the psychic pressure to reach the tactical controls. All ships, upload the bacterial quantum patterns to your shield generators. Modify the frequencies to match their neural disruption effect. The Alliance fleet's shields began to pulse with new energy as they integrated the bacterial quantum signatures. The Reaver energy beings recoiled as they encountered not just physical resistance, but a type of consciousness they couldn't overwhelm. The collective quantum field of billions of years of microscopic evolution. They didn't understand. Luminara observed, her own natural bioluminescence, somehow protected by the bacterial field. True evolution isn't about becoming more powerful. It's about finding balance within a greater ecosystem. Elena nodded. They tried to force evolution, to stand outside the natural order. But you can't transcend nature by destroying it. You have to become part of it. The battle reached its climax as the Reaver consciousness, trapped between energy and matter, tried desperately to find a form that could survive. But Earth's bacterial defenders had spent billions of years adapting to every threat their harsh world could produce. The quantum interference field grew stronger, forcing the energy beings to coalesce back into physical form. All ships, open fire, Elena commanded. Show them why true strength comes from being part of something greater than yourself. The Alliance fleet struck with everything they had. Human mass drivers, celesti energy weapons, and technologies from a dozen other species, all working in concert. The Reaver mass, forced back into vulnerable physical form, couldn't withstand the combined assault. When it was over, the debris field contained something unexpected. Cores of pure quantum computational matrix, the last remnants of the Reaver's collective consciousness, now dormant and contained by the bacterial field. We can preserve these, Sarah said, examining the readings. Study them, learn from them. Maybe even find a way to redirect their evolution towards something less destructive. In the days that followed, as the Alliance fleet returned to Celesti space, Elena found herself again standing at the observation deck. Earth was invisible at this distance, but she could feel its influence in every part of their victory. The Security Council's decision is final, she told Luminara, who had come to hear humanity's response to the Alliance's request. We'll help establish a permanent defense force, combining our strength with your technology. But we won't just be guards or warriors. Oh, Luminara's colors showed curiosity. We'll be teachers, Elena explained. We'll show other species what we learned on Earth, that true strength comes from being part of an ecosystem, not trying to dominate it. That evolution isn't about becoming the strongest, but about finding your place in the greater whole. The war was over, but humanity's role in the galaxy was just beginning. They had come into the stars ready to fight, only to discover that their greatest gift wasn't their strength or their technology, but the lessons learned from the harsh world that had forged them. As the Terra's shield began its journey home, Elena thought about how far they'd come. Humanity had feared their deadly world, had made them too dangerous for galactic society. Instead, it had prepared them to become its protectors, teaching a lesson as old as life itself, that sometimes the greatest power comes not from standing alone, but from being part of something greater than yourself.